My mom slid a stack of bills across the kitchen table and looked straight at me. "We're not paying for another one of your little projects, Renee. You can barely keep the lights on." The whole table went quiet. My aunts, my cousins, my sister, every single one of them staring at me. Some had their forks halfway to their mouths, a few were smirking. My dad didn't say a word. He just looked away and cut his steak like I wasn't even there. I sat with that humiliation burning in my chest. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I just looked down at my plate and breathed. What none of them knew was that 3 days earlier, I had signed documents that changed everything. My name is Renee. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. It's small, the kind of small where your couch is also your home office, and your dining table doubles as an art desk. I'm a freelance graphic designer. That means inconsistent income, no benefits, no health insurance through a company name that would impress anyone at Thanksgiving, no corporate title to drop into conversation when relatives ask what I'm doing with my life. I'm the youngest of three. My older sister, Candace, is a nurse. My brother, Derek, works in finance. At every family gathering, their names come up early and often. Candace saved a patient last month. Derek just got promoted. Their achievements fill the room like warm light. I've always been the shadow at the edge of it. I was never married, no house, no babies on anyone's vision board for me. The family had quietly decided, somewhere along the way, that I was the one who didn't quite land right. They didn't say it out loud all the time, but they didn't have to. You can feel a low expectation the same way you feel a draft in a room. You just know it's there. But I had something they didn't. I had Dottie. Great Aunt Dottie was my mother's aunt, a quiet woman in her late 70s who lived alone in a tidy house in Atlanta. The rest of the family treated her like a footnote. They thought she was just a sweet old woman with a fixed income and a garden she loved. They called her occasionally, sent flowers on her birthday, but they didn't sit with her. They didn't call on a random Tuesday just to hear her voice. I did. Every week, without fail. I wasn't polished or impressive by their standards, but I had a relationship they never bothered to build. If you've ever been the one your family quietly gave up on, not because you failed, but because your path didn't look the way they expected, I want you to subscribe right now. You are not alone in this. Have you ever been the one they stopped expecting greatness from? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Drop your story and click hype. Let's go. Dottie passed on a Tuesday morning in early October. It was peaceful, the hospice nurse told me. She went in her sleep. I had visited her just 2 weeks before, sat beside her bed, held her hand while she told me stories about her life that she had never told anyone else. I didn't know then that it would be the last time. The memorial was small, just family, a few of her old neighbors, and the smell of grocery store carnations filling the living room of her little Atlanta house. I cried. I'm not ashamed of that. I cried because I loved her and because she was genuinely one of the best people I had ever known. My brother Derek found that funny, apparently. He came up beside me near the food table, a paper plate in one hand, and said it low enough that only I could hear. "Don't cry too hard, Renee. It's not like she left you anything. She was barely getting by." I didn't respond. I just looked at him. My mother was standing nearby. She heard him. She didn't correct him. Instead, she nodded slowly and said, "Dottie always did have a soft spot for lost causes." She wasn't being cruel. That's the part that stings the most. She genuinely believed that. She thought she was just stating a fact. Within an hour, the family had moved on from grieving to logistics. Someone mentioned the house, someone else mentioned furniture. The conversation shifted into who should handle what, and my sister, Candace, pulled my mother aside and said, quietly but not quietly enough, "I already called the estate lawyer. I figured someone responsible should handle it." I heard that word, responsible. I felt where it landed. I said nothing. I stood there with my paper cup of lukewarm coffee and I let them talk. My mind was a camera, recording every word, every glance, every assumption laid out in plain sight. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. It was from a law firm I had never heard of.
not the one Candace had called. This one was addressed only to me. I held it for a long time before I opened it. The first betrayal came from a phone call I wasn't supposed to know about. My cousin mentioned it offhand, the way people do when they forget you're the subject. Candace had organized a family call, parents included, to talk about next steps for Dottie's estate, a planning call. Nobody told me about it. When I asked Candace directly, her answer was smooth and almost kind. "We didn't think you'd have anything useful to add." Just like that. Not mean, not explosive, just a quiet, practiced erasure. The second betrayal came at a meeting with the lawyer Candace had hired. I showed up because I had every right to be there. The lawyer, a stiff man in a gray suit, barely made eye contact with me the entire time. He spoke over me twice when I tried to ask a question. At one point, Derek leaned over to Candace and muttered, loud enough for me to hear, "Why is she even here?" Nobody told him to stop. The meeting wrapped up with the family happily assuming they'd split Dottie's modest house and call it done. $20,000 each, maybe. Enough to feel like something. The third one was the cruelest because it came wrapped in love. My mother called me 2 days later. Her voice was soft, careful, the voice she uses when she thinks she's helping. "Sweetheart, I just want you to manage your expectations. Dottie loved you, I know that, but love doesn't pay your rent. Maybe it's time you looked at getting a real job, something stable. Stop waiting for life to hand you something." She meant every word with genuine care. That's what made it so hard to hear. I took a slow breath. "You're probably right, Mom." She said goodbye. I hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of traffic outside my window. Then I picked up the certified letter from my kitchen counter and read it again. What they didn't know was that Dottie hadn't been barely getting by. She had been building something, quietly, carefully, over decades, the same way I had been building my own small life, without applause, without anyone watching. Dottie was not who they assumed she was. She had started buying stock in the 1980s, small purchases, nothing dramatic. She reinvested every dividend. She bought her first rental property in Atlanta in 1994 for almost nothing and held it. Then a second one. She lived simply not because she had to, but because she chose to. The family saw a sweet old woman in a modest house and made their assumptions and never looked past them. I was her emergency contact. I had her power of attorney. When she had a health scare in 2019, I was the one who sat in the hospital waiting room for 6 hours. The family sent a flower arrangement. Nice enough, it arrived on the second day. The week after the memorial, I had a private meeting with the attorney whose name was on my letter. His office was quiet, smelled like old wood and strong coffee, and he was thorough and careful as he walked me through everything. By the time I walked back out to my car, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, not from shock exactly, from the weight of it, the full, enormous weight of being seen. I sat in my car for 20 minutes. I had a decision to make. I could call my family that same afternoon, I could tell them everything and watch the whole thing explode at once, or I could wait. I could let them keep talking, let them keep revealing themselves, and when the time came, I would let the truth speak on its own. I chose to wait. There is one person in my life who has always known how to help me think clearly, and her name is Sandra. She's 58 years old, a senior partner at a design consultancy in Columbus, and she hired me 7 years ago when I was still figuring out if I even had a future in this field. She built her firm from absolutely nothing, and she has never once treated my unconventional path like a problem to be solved. I met her for coffee about a week after my meeting with the attorney. I didn't tell her the numbers. I told her about my family, the calls I wasn't invited to, the comments, the way they had already decided how the story would end without including me in it. She listened without interrupting. She wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at me steadily. "You don't owe anyone a preview of your life," she said. "Let them assume. Assumptions are their problem." That sentence settled something in me that I hadn't been able to settle on my own. Sandra connected me with her personal financial advisor and a trusted estate attorney, a different one from the firm Candace had hired. Together, we made sure everything was protected, properly documented, and airtight. Meanwhile, my family was getting louder. Derek started texting me, short, business-like messages. Hey, just need your signature on the house split so we can move forward. Then a follow-up, then another. My sister sent a formal email with my parents CC'd, laying out the proposed split of Dottie's house as if it had already been decided, and I just needed to confirm I understood. Then my mother called again. The lawyer says the house should sell for around $80,000. We figured we'd split it 4 ways. That's $20,000 each. She paused, and I could hear the generosity she thought she was offering. That should help you out, right? Give you a little cushion. They had no idea, not even close. I'll be in touch soon, I told her. The will reading was scheduled for a Thursday morning. My attorney arranged it. I told my family only that there were some documents that needed to be handled formally and that everyone should be present. Candace assumed I had finally come around. Derek showed up in a suit, which told me everything about how he expected the morning to go. My mother wore a nice blouse. They all settled into their chairs in the conference room, like they were there to collect something they had already earned. The attorney opened by acknowledging everyone. He reviewed the basics first. Dottie's house, yes, would be divided equally among the 4 siblings. The family relaxed visibly. Derek actually smiled. I watched Candace let out a slow breath through her nose, satisfied, already doing the math in her head. Then the attorney set down the first document and picked up a second. There is a secondary estate document executed separately designating a sole beneficiary. The room shifted. I felt it more than I saw it. He opened the letter that Dottie had written herself in her own handwriting, and he read it aloud. She had written that for the last 10 years, she had watched her family from a quiet distance. She had watched who called and who didn't, who visited and who sent flowers instead. She had watched one person show up consistently, without expectation, without agenda. She had watched that person sit beside her in hospital rooms and laugh with her on random Tuesdays and treat her like someone whose life still mattered. She had written my name. The secondary estate was a portfolio of stock held for decades, 2 fully paid-off investment properties in Atlanta, and liquid assets. The total value was $3.8 million, left entirely to me.
Derek stood up before the attorney even finished. That's not legal. She was old. She didn't know what she was doing. The attorney was ready. He laid out 3 years of documented decisions, all properly witnessed. He presented a letter from Dottie's physician confirming full cognitive clarity up until her final months. There was no angle. There was no argument that would hold. Candace had gone completely still. Her face was the color of paper. She turned to me slowly. "You knew," she said. "You knew this whole time." I looked at her. I kept my voice level and quiet. "I knew Dottie," I said. "That's the difference." My mother didn't say anything. She just stared at the surface of the conference table, her hands folded in her lap. That silence told me more than any words could have. I thanked the attorney, I picked up my folder, and I walked out. I didn't give a speech. I didn't look back to check their expressions. That was never the point. Over the following months, I used part of the inheritance to build the design studio I had always imagined. Not a massive operation, just mine. A real space with good light and proper equipment, and work I was proud to put my name on. The kind of place where I could finally stop apologizing for the path I had chosen. I also set up a scholarship in Dottie's name for young women in creative fields who don't fit the traditional mold, women whose potential the world hasn't recognized yet, women like me, like her. My family and I didn't have a dramatic falling out. There were no screaming matches or final confrontations. Things just grew quiet between us, and that quiet spread into distance, and that distance became the new normal. Some bridges I came to understand had been crumbling long before the money ever entered the picture. I called Sandra the evening after the will reading. She picked up on the second ring. She saw me, I told her. When nobody else did, Dottie saw me. Sandra didn't say much. She didn't need to. I've thought about that a lot since then, about why I kept quiet for so long after I found out. People assume I was being strategic, waiting to win some kind of family chess game, but that's not it.
I kept the secret because what Dottie gave me felt sacred. It wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that showing up quietly, without applause, without recognition, without anyone telling you it matters, is still worth something. That the relationships you build in the margins of your life, the ones nobody photographs or praises, can be the most real things you ever have. I didn't keep the secret to hurt them. I kept it because I finally understood that some things are sacred, and not everything needs their permission to be real. Was there someone in your life, maybe not even a parent, maybe someone the rest of your family overlooked or dismissed, who saw your worth when the people closest to you couldn't? Tell me about them in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Subscribe and join a community of people who refuse to let someone else's low expectations define their ceiling. Click hype to help this story reach every person who has ever been the one they underestimated. Being dismissed by the people who are supposed to know you best is one of the loneliest feelings in the world. If you've carried that kind of quiet pain, I want you to know you've found the right place. Subscribe and become a part of this community. We see each other here. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this one helped you, let me know by clicking hype. Thank you for being here.